Zero Seats, the Labour 600, by Academic Agent. Currently, the regime is in a bad place, but things are especially bad in Britain. A few weeks ago, I started pushing the idea on Twitter that the Tories should retain 0 seats in the next general election, which quickly spawned memes and this particularly excellent fan-made spoof campaign video, which currently has over 30,000 views on YouTube and over 250,000 views on Twitter. I've been stunned by just how quickly this has taken off and gone viral, including live enactments on Lotus Eaters, and yours truly saying the phrase directly to Jacob Rees-Mogg on GB News. In fact, so successful has been this organic campaign that Telegraph journalists are now retweeting conspiracy theories that I'm an MI5 agent working on behalf of the Labour Party. And this in the same week as scurrilous and libelous hit piece. A scurrilous and libelous hit piece was published by discredited far-left activists. As things stand, with the hapless Rishi Sunak leading the Tories into oblivion, they are projected to be on 98 seats against 498 for Labour. This is not good enough. It needs to be 0 seats versus the Labour 600. Recently, during a stimulating conversation, two chums of mine worried about the prospects of what a genuinely 0 seat scenario would look like. Let us put aside for a moment that I believe the Tory party will come to their senses and not go into the next election with Sunak, and imagine for a moment that they do, and the election will be Starmer versus Sunak, which is currently our reality. In this article, I will outline why, in this scenario, we should learn not to worry and to love the Labour 600. Liberal democracy is built on the illusion of opposition, with the Tories and Labour locked in a mortal struggle for supremacy and power. However, the truth is closer to a pro-wrestling match. Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant were presented as mortal enemies in WrestleMania 3, but they were good friends who were cooperating in a match with a predetermined outcome. This is the difference between kayfabe and reality. The political kayfabe in British politics is something like the evil pro-capitalist Tories versus good pro-worker socialist Labour. But by now, everyone knows this to be a fiction. The truth is that MPs are members of a permanent political class who are united in their contempt for the British people and who both agree with the central tenets of globalist technocracy, social liberalism, also known as woke, and unlimited immigration. In 2003, the Conservative MP Michael Gove wrote an hilariously embarrassing article in the Times, which declared in its headline, "I can't fight my feelings anymore. I love Tony." He was, of course, talking about the then Labour leader and Prime Minister Tony Blair, in a rare moment of breaking the political fourth wall. But you all know this. That's why you support the idea of 0 seats for the Tories. So why is the Labour 600 good for us and bad for them? First, and most obviously, it would obliterate the illusion of liberal democracy. In Shakespeare's Richard II, there is a scene in which the deposed king forces his usurper, Bolingbroke, Henry IV, to watch the spectacle of the king uncrowning himself. During this devastating scene, Richard asks for a mirror and then smashes it on the floor, looking at his face in the shattered glass. The illusion of the political formula of the period, which gave any king legitimacy, The great chain of being was now totally broken. Henry IV becomes king not through the mandate of heaven, but by mundane Machiavellian facts, such as having a bigger army and greater support among the nobility. From the point of view of the believer in the great chain of being, the scene is unbearably tragic, and indeed, in Shakespeare's own time, it was omitted from public performance because it was considered dangerous to Tudor power. The Labour 600 would be essentially the same as smashing Richard II's mirror. For many people, this would be as traumatic because it would destroy the legitimating myth of our system. The Dark Lord, Tony Blair, himself understands this. In A Journey, he writes about his memories of the night of his historic 1997 election win. Pretty soon, the scale of the victory became clear. This was not a win, it was a landslide. After about 2 hours, for a time I actually became worried. The moving line at the bottom was showing over 100 Labour seats. The Tories had just 6. I began to think I had done something unconstitutional. I had meant to defeat the Tories and do so handsomely, but what if we had wiped them out? This remarkable passage shows us Blair worrying that he'd, in effect, broken politics. He understands that the dialectical relationship between Labour and Tory is a necessary condition of our system. We can see then that the Labour 600 is not Blair's dream, but his nightmare. He was relieved to see his opponents get some seats in 1997. He wanted a big victory, but not a wipeout. What we want, however, is a wipeout. Let us imagine for a moment a Keir Starmer Labour Party with 600 seats and no opposition. First, they would have to try and justify this. They might argue, for example, that the strength of this mandate is so big that it shows that the nation has thoroughly rejected populism on the left and the right, heralding a brave new return to the progressive moderate centrist consensus of the Blair years. It seems like the obvious conclusion to draw from such a result, but it would be a lie. And everyone, left, right and centre, would know it was a lie. The Tories are set to lose this election, not because the country has lurched to the left, but because the Tories are widely and correctly perceived to be traitors who live to appease the left while showing open contempt for their own voter base. 0 seats is not gaining support because anyone likes Labour, but because everyone hates the Tories. The by-election result in Wellingborough, held on the 16th of February 2024, is instructive on this. These are the results. Labour, 13,844, a gain of 107. Tories, 7,408, a loss of 24,869. Reform, from a baseline of 0, gaining 3,919. Lib Dems, 1,422, a loss of 2,656 votes, and the Greens with 1,020 votes, a loss of 801. Notice that the huge drop in Tory votes did not translate into votes for Labour or the Lib Dems, who both lost votes. This is disillusionment with the political class as a whole, and not an endorsement of Labour. If something like this is replicated nationwide, Labour would struggle to run the above narrative, and, more to the point, almost no one would be listening in any case. The government, in effect, would be ever less legitimate. If Labour become more activist, interventionist, woke, in your face, and so on, they'd seriously risk widespread non-compliance, which in regime terms is an endgame territory. I suspect that Starmer, guided by Tony Blair, would not be like this, but rather voice platitudes such as, "We are a government for everyone, the British people, not only Labour supporters," which is what Joseph Biden should have done in America, but did not. The political reality of running a nation with 600 seats, in real terms, a virtual dictatorship, would also bring home the stark realities of power to Labour. Without the theatre and distraction of the Tories, there to provide false opposition, they'd have sole responsibility for governance. I do not mean pretending to govern, kicking the can down the road, or symbolic acts, as in the culture wars. I mean the raw realities, responsibilities, and obligations of holding power. Picture Stella Creasy and Jess Phillips, like rabbits in the headlights, faced with the prospect that the fortunes of this country will now rest on decisions they make, with no one else to blame. Both parties have habitually sought to avoid facing this reality, by blaming each other, by blaming Brexit, by blaming the EU, by blaming almost everything on external forces. The Labour 600 would remove many of these crutches, and the first Starmer ministry would simply have to own the whole piece. If they start trying to blame the permanent civil service, the deep state, bureaucracy, or whatever else, that would be a win. If genuine leftists, Corbyn supporters, Owen Jones types, and so on, become so disillusioned that they too no longer believe in liberal democracy, that would also be a win. If establishment right types, the backbone of any system and any regime, check out from the system completely, that would be a win. The existence of the Tory party and its false and weak token opposition is the only thing stopping this dream from becoming a reality. Blair's nightmare is my dream. We can make our dreams a reality.